I'm Chad.
I'm Dad. No, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be Dad first.
Oh yeah, you're Dad.
I'm Dad.
I'm Chad, and this is our channel.
Okay, it's like December 7th, something like that, 22, and I just wanted to give you guys an update. So obviously we got the wings on it, so it took me, my wife Taylor, and Mom and Dad to get the wings on. The bolts are kind of hard to get in, but more on that later. And I talked to a couple guys and they had the same problem. One of the wings went in perfect, and we actually used a dowel rod on these guys on the forward bar. And I don't know if I've talked about this yet. It's been a minute since we made a video, but cutting these T-bones were very nerve-wracking because I was scared if we cut those and got those wrong. The forward side of the T-bone actually was flush, almost flush with the weld. It was pretty crazy, but this was put the wing on, take it off, put the wing on, take it off, because I wanted to make sure that these cuts, that T-bone actually comes pretty long and you cut it, and then I filed it and I wanted to make sure it slid into here perfect. I think we had like a 32nd of an inch clearance. And then something that they started doing on the later kits for this angle of incidence, it talks about it, and I kept looking at this going, what? But there is a hole drilled here, and there is not a hole drilled here. You drill it. And we haven't done that yet because we were seeking clarification, but on the newer kits, there's 3 holes. It's already drilled. One here, one up here, and one down here. And what happens is, say that your angle of incidence is off, and instead of putting the bump trim in, you can actually loosen your strut, lift up the wing via the rear spar, and then use another bolt hole. And it talks about it has to be 0.2 inches to make a difference. So Dad and I have measured these, and we're like 0.45 of a degree off between the 2 wings. So what we're going to do is loosen the spar before we drill this and make sure those guys are as close as possible so that angle of incidence is set correctly. Man, what to go over. We went ahead and rigged up everything because what happens is, and you can kind of see that right here, these bolts, and it calls for, I believe, a 10, and we used a 7. What happens is that bolt ends up hitting on your flap gap seal, so you'll have to file that. And we wanted to make sure everything fit correctly before we painted it, because that's the last thing you want to do is paint it and then get up here and things are rubbing. That's why we did that. We're gonna have to, I know I'm bouncing around, guys, we're gonna have to leave these off because we're gonna go ahead and get the wing, the airplane painted and then put everything back together, so we can't rivet these guys yet. We went ahead and got a gap 26 or gap 27 angle of attack Garmin pitot tube, and they actually sent me a certified mount, which was $300 and something. But anyway, I'd already used it by the time we figured it out. But anyway, so we went ahead and ran more tubing to the back. That wasn't that big of a deal with my wife's help, Taylor. And then I talked to the guys up at Rands, and you can put your OAT here, but they really like to see them out of the prop wash. I was talking about putting it underneath, but then we were talking about exhaust. Josh from Project 2 Arrow, we were talking about putting it. And the whole reason was just so we didn't have to run more wiring. But went ahead and bit the bullet and ran it here. I like that. It's out of the sun, it's out of prop wash, exhaust, etc. And the wire actually went along fine through here and came down to right here, and then I added a fastener or a connector there, and then I have another connector here because we had talked about putting it here, so went ahead and put another connector there. So plug that in today and it all works. The last thing that I have to do here is wire up the brow lights. I don't really like the way that is, so that's why I haven't connected it yet. I don't know if I'm going to use a different glue or what. Went ahead and just painted the dash. I think that turned out really well. Wrapped that with a carbon fiber tape. Got the windshield installed, and that's where we watched Braden C, I believe is his name. We watched his video a couple of times. and decided not to make a video on it because his video was really good and the instructions are straightforward on that. It's just a lot of taking it off, putting it back on, taking it on, putting it back off, making sure it's all right. Now this glues to this with very expensive glue, and then instead of gluing here, it rivets. And used to Rand's had it clecoed, not clecoed, but riveted into here as well, along with these guys, which we have cut and fitted, and I still have to do some more. Starting to like the way they fit, but these guys actually glue or epoxy as well, and they used to rivet these, but we were able to, I know I'm bouncing around, guys, I'm thinking of a million things we've done and we haven't videoed, but we drilled the windshield very carefully. We did not use the acrylic bits that they talked about using, and we got lucky. I wouldn't recommend it because I was very nervous about that, because it was done and I'm sure that thing's expensive. It was all fitted and ready to go. Dr. Don actually drilled all the way through. I don't like those nut zerts, but that's another option. Dr. Don drilled all the way through, went back and watched his video and put nuts here. And that's an option. We painted all this stuff ourselves, and that turned out pretty good. The big thing was the shim back there. I don't know if you can see it, that Braden C talks about. We've started on these guys, and the last wiring that I have, I may have to remake this bracket, but this is how I'm connecting the wiring coming from the switches, which is ran down here, and then it comes up. I'm trying to find it here. Oh, it's outside the plane. So these guys right here will run up, and I know I've got it all written down where these go, but they'll fasten here. I don't know if you can see in this junction block. And then there will be a connector here, and then this is where it goes out to the strobes and the landing light and taxi light. So still kind of playing around with this, getting it the way we want it, and yeah, so that's been fun. The wiring, when we first did the plane, we didn't know what wire to use, and we used the wrong wire. So we ordered the correct mil-spec 20 gauge, 22 gauge, 3-strand, 3-conductor with the ground, the shielded ground. And we were able to pull it all out of here without too much fuss, and ran the correct wire. There you can see kind of a shot of it, but yeah, I wish I had done that right before we closed the wing up, because it was a pain, but we got it done. It is possible to do. There is the landing light, taxi light. It's connected, ready to go. And then this guy's ready. Did this today. I love these connectors. They are so easy to build, and they are awesome. Haven't had any trouble. The wingtips, which are the Aerosport, and then those are the actual ones that we bought from Rand's, the Avio LEDs for the nav position, anti-collision lights. Strobe. But you have to actually put this guy, I called Will up there and he sent me some instructions because we didn't receive any, but what we did is we put this guy together, tape, and then set it up on the wingtip and clamped it, got it where we wanted it, and then we took off the outside via the tape, and then we marked our holes, took it apart, drilled these guys, put it back, put our nut plates in, and then secured it from the inside. And what we found to work best, I'm getting to the epoxy. So what we found to work best was an Allen head screw with a big shoulder on it, because you can get your fingers on it, and that's what we ended up using. I think they're 8/32, but a Phillips, it's just almost impossible. We tried that, and the Allen worked so much better. So I think those are 1/2 inch as well. So then you will drill this and use Clecos and epoxy that. And here's the epoxy used for that and the windshield. It is the 3M Scotch Weld 2216. I found this on eBay, and actually it was manufactured this year, just a few months ago, so that's good. But that worked very well. Took a little while to dry because it was cold in the shop, but that stuff is super strong. We scuffed up the windshield beforehand. It's crazy how this is made. So this is actually not made symmetrical, because if you look here, we were able to get 3 of the rivets in, and I had to actually put an Avex rivet on the inside of that because it did not line up. You can actually see the rivet right there. So this side, I was actually able to get 4, but I've noticed some other planes that are the same. So like I said, that's not symmetrical. Don't really like the way this all lines up, but it is what it is. Dr. Don actually put this on the outside, and then they just filled it. I don't know with what, maybe Bondo, I'm not sure, but his actually looks pretty slick. You don't really see the rivets like you do on mine. Let's see, you got the gear painted. I don't know if I've talked about that. Got the brakes done. I actually drove it around outside a little bit without the wings on. And yes, the wings have to come back off to get out of the shop. Sorry if I'm bouncing the camera around, guys. I'm just trying to think of all the things that we've done and anything that can help you guys. The new kits, I noticed these are coming already cut, but this was just hours and hours of sanding, but filing to get the shape just right. And then we epoxied those guys in with a clear epoxy. Yeah, all the wiring is done. Really like how everything turned out. Again, I've got to do this guy, and then for the brow lights, and then I've got to do the wing, that one connector there between those guys, and then run the switches and the power up to that junction block, and that's all the wiring. Just trying to get all of the fuel lines ran the way I want it, and everything else, closeout pieces, and just button everything up, guys. But we're like really close. There's not much left to do to button this guy up and get it over to paint, and then over to our hangar that we've been paying on for February will be a year without using. So yeah, so super close. Oh, that was another piece that I ordered from Aerosport, was this guy back here, and got this guy done. He just goes on with 4 nut plates. Got that guy on. Steve over at Clear Direct, just watched his video on how to do that. Pretty straightforward and simple. Did that a long time ago. That was one of the first things I did, but that's the factory Rans piece. I think that's the only thing that we used. We actually used the Aerosport on everything else. If anybody needs wingtips, I've got a set. Never even took them down and cut on them. So the Aerosport fit very well, minimal sanding to get those things to fit. But yeah, guys, I'm really excited. I mean, it's like it took a second. You know, we got to a point to where we were just like, man, you know, I'm not going to work on this thing, whatever, you know. And then it just kind of got to a crest in a hill and just said, you know what, push through it. As soon as we got the wings on it, it really changed the morale. And that, you know, you do a lot of work on these things and you just don't see a lot of progress because it's small things like, you know, doing this wire and trying to fit this part and cut it out and etc. And, you know, I mean, you can throw it together, but you're not going to be happy later. So there's been a lot of things that we've done, and it just, people are like, man, when are you know, have y'all done anything? What's going on? And, you know, the workmanship really shows when you're done, and you're really happy that you took your time and did it right instead of throwing it together and say, hey, I got my plane done in 6 months or whatever, you know. And some people can do that and plane looks really good. Dr. Don, I think, took 7 months and his plane looks awesome. But I would just rather take a little bit longer, and because if it's not right, I'm gonna tear it back apart. We actually glued one of these pieces in and I didn't realize it, but it didn't fit just right. Like, so this actually sticks out to kind of become flush out here, and it with the spar, and it wasn't, because this wasn't filed all the way. So I actually pulled it apart today and opened it up almost another 1/4 of an inch between the top and the bottom to get it to pop out and fit in there correctly. So that's been our thing. Anyway, so what I'm getting back to is we got to that hill, and once the wings were on it, we were like, oh my goodness, you know, it's starting to look like an airplane. So then it was like, man, let's get back to work. And here we are, you know, like a month later, and it was like, wow, we were sitting there kicking ourselves going, man, are we ever going to get this done? And man, in a month, we've almost got it into a flying airplane. Like literally the wiring in the back, finished the rigging, horizontal stabilizer, and a couple small things. If this were in a hangar at an airport, it would be ready to go in a couple of weeks probably, you know, of 3-4 hours a day. I'm sure we could get it to that point, but I want to get it painted and get everything just right before we fly it, because I know that if we get it to the hangar and we start flying it, we'll probably just won't ever paint it. But anyway, just wanted to give you guys an update so you guys could see where we are, and appreciate you guys watching. Hey guys, thanks for watching another episode of Dad and Chad.
If you like this video, share it with your friends and give us a thumbs up,
And never miss an episode of Dad and Chad by hitting that subscribe button.
because we'll be back next Tuesday with another episode.
Thanks again for watching
Dad
and Chad.